Hello again, my name's Daniel and welcome back to my channel. Guilty feet have got no rhythm. Today we're going to do my Friday reads and my week in books. So a couple of news stories first of all. This week the Costa Book of the Year was awarded. This is after they pick a winner in each of the 5 categories. Each of them, those winners goes up against each other and they pick the one Costa book to rule them all, and this year the winner was called The Mermaid of Black Conch by Monique Roffey, and the category that this book had won was the actual novel. So there's also a debut novel and autobiography, biography and children's and poetry, I think. Every year it's you never know which one's going to win. This one was won by the novel. I'm not familiar with the book at all, so if any of you read it, I'd love to hear. I know Simon Savage, the booktuber and former podcaster, much missed podcaster of the readers, but no, I enjoy his blogs, was on the judging panel this year, so I'm waiting to see what he says about how that experience was. But that's the Costa Book of the Year, formerly the Whitbread, and now the Costa Book of the Year. The other story, I got an email just today from an author that I have come to read in the last couple of years, and I must have signed up on her website for her mailing list, and I got an email from Sarah Gran. This is Sarah Graham, which is sent out to everyone on the mailing list, talking about her frustrations with publishing, and my reading of it was that she's originally from New York. She now lives in LA, so she's working on a TV project. So she's sold. I think she has 6 or 7 books published. She's working as a writer, but she has 2 books waiting to go. One of them, I think, is ready to be published. She has a series of books. This is the first of the Claire DeWitt and the City of the Dead, a sort of Zen noir, drugged up, magnificent bit of work. This was the first of her books that I read. I picked this up in the Housing Works second-hand bookstore on my last trip to New York, and was blown away by this. Just a top read, first one out of the gate, and there's 2 more Claire DeWitt books to follow. She says she's got 2 books ready to go, neither of them Claire DeWitt books, so standalones, and I've read one of her standalones, a book called Dope, which was dark-hearted, really misanthropic, nasty bit of noir, which I highly recommend. Sarah Gran is absolutely, hands down, for me, one of the top writers that I've discovered in the last few years. I really, the other thing, this one is blurbed, or front blurb, by Sue Grafton, one of the Dianes of mystery fiction, who I've never read her Kinsey Mulhone series. Also blurbed by Laura Lippman, foreshadowing. Anyway, the gist of her letter was that she doesn't want to mess around with any of the big publishers, that they just drive her crazy. They don't do the work that they're supposed to do, so editors don't edit, marketing people don't market, and they're just machines to publish the top names, and they're only supporting the ones that are going to bring more money back to the publishing house. And for middlist or niche writers, it's just been an awful experience for her, and she's really questioning what she's going to do with these books, and it was kind of disheartening. So she's a working writer, she's had novels published. Novels, I think, have an audience. Like, you may not have heard of her, but if you Google her, you'll find that within the world that she exists, she is respected and known, and these Claire DeWitt books are absolutely outstanding. And it was kind of disheartening to read her take on the unwillingness of publishers to take risks. And I wanted to contrast that with a long-form article I saw in The Guardian, which was an interview with an author, a first-time author of a new book. The book is called Girl A. The author is Abigail Dean, and it's quite a lengthy article in The Guardian, and it's an absolute masterclass, my reading of it, a masterclass in a publicist, a marketing person in a publishing company, placing a story, placing that interview and getting it into a major bookish newspaper. So many people will have read that story in order to book. The book is already out. I would not be surprised if we see it showing up in a few places on BookTube. It's a sort of based on a true crime story. Abigail Dean is a very presentable young first-time author who was a lawyer. I think a lawyer for Google, and took some time off from the law to write this book, and is still working full time. And it was a great story. It was well told. She comes across great. It was the whole thing was very appealing. Girl A by Abigail Dean, and I'd read that story, and it's the kind of something, I didn't in this instance, but it's the kind of thing that puts a book on my radar. Someone who gets a big story like that. And it's kind of, sort of crimey, true crimey, in my wheelhouse. It's got the girl in the title, so we've got Gone Girl and Girl on the Train, and now we have Girl A, that whole trope that has gone crazy over the last 4 or 5 years. And I just thought it was an interesting contrast after I got this email from mailing list from Sarah Gran about her frustration with getting books placed and getting promoted. And here we have an example of, and the story, of course, is that the book was part of a bidding war and sold for 6 figures. Well, of course, when you pay 6 figures for a book, it's in your interest to place your story in the Guardian, have as many people talk about it as possible. So that was kind of interesting, and I will link. I can't link to the Sarah Gran thing because I got an email, but I will link to the story of Abigail Dean's interview, and I wish her only the best. But I thought it was an interesting contrast. Reading wise, that was. My notes were holding up the thing there. You really should not play with that. Okay, letting go now. Reading-wise, had a good week. I finished Waking Lions by Ayelet Gundar-Goshen. This was an Israeli. She's an Israeli author. This was translated by, I think I said, Sondra Silverstone, translated from Hebrew. This came out a few years ago, and the translation came out, I think, a few years ago. And I picked this up in as part of my effort to read more local authors or books by Israeli authors, because I don't really read enough of them, and I probably should. This was tremendous. This was a real stealth work. It starts off as a kind of Crime and Punishment retelling. So we have a doctor, a neurosurgeon, Dr. Eitan Green, who on his way home from working late, blows off steam by driving his SUV off-road into the desert and just going a bit too fast and just winding down the window and feeling the breeze before he goes home to his wife and kids. And while doing this, knocks down an Eritrean refugee. He's a neurosurgeon. He gets out of the car, sees the man on the ground, knows very quickly that the man will not survive, and decides to get back in his car and drive home. So far, so Raskolnikov. What happens is that the next day, while his wife is picking the kids up from nursery, there's a knock on the door. He opens it, and there is an Eritrean woman standing there holding his wallet. So now we have the scene set. She tells him to meet her. I promise you, I'm not going to go into spoiler territory. This is all first 2 chapters. She tells him to meet her late at night, and he agrees to, because he doesn't want the story to come out. His wife, by the way, is a police detective, and he goes and meets the woman in an abandoned warehouse in the desert at night, thinking that he's being set up and he's going to be murdered, only to find out that she has gleaned from his wallet that he is a doctor, and she's invited other refugees who she lives and works with to come and set up a makeshift clinic and extorts from him treatment of the other refugees. And the story continues. What we get here in this setup is something where I thought I knew what was happening, but what we're really getting is a slow peeling back of layers of race and class, and a story about Israeli society, which I think may be mirrored in other countries. I've lived in the UK. I'm familiar with sort of issues of race and class in the States. You have Eitan Green, the white Ashkenaz doctor at the top of the tree. His wife, Liat, who's Liat Green now, but previously we glean, and I had to double check this because I knew it was important, we're told her maiden name and her family is described, and it's clear then that previous to marrying Dr. Green, she was from a Middle Eastern family, so an Iraqi Jew, and Israeli society. They're still between the Ashkenaz, the sort of white Caucasian presenting Jews like me, and the Sephardi, Middle Eastern Jews of Iraqi, Egyptian, Libyan, Syrian, Yemeni, Moroccan Jews are half a step below that in Israeli society, and this is something that plays out in the news, in politics, everywhere. It's definitely part of what happens here that not everyone may be familiar with, but it became clear to me. Then we have the refugees. These are Eritreans, Sudanese, North Africans who have escaped or left the countries they live in, Northeast Africa, where life was so terrible that it was preferable to walk through the desert all the way up, if you know what the map looks like, all the way up the top of Africa, through Egypt, and on the other side of the Sinai Desert, when you make it all the way through Egypt, you get to Israel. And the Eritrean, Sudanese refugees have made this trip, smuggled in by Bedouin Arabs who live in Israel, are Israeli, but have their own place in Israeli class system. And so you have the Ashkenaz, the Sephardi, the refugees, the Bedouin, the interactions between each class, the invisibility of the lower class to the class above, the conflict between the classes, the Eritreans and the Bedouin, because the Bedouin are the people smugglers of the Eritreans. There's no love lost between these two groups, and all this plays out that previously hidden, previously unthought of. Eitan Green, who sits at the top of this tree, this doctor, suddenly becomes embroiled in this underbelly of life, of illicit clinics, of drugs, of illegal workers, of black economy. There is, of course, a class below all of these that doesn't appear in the book at all, and these are the occupied Palestinians. And I believe, or at least my reading of it is, and I believe this is the author's intention, is that this is a caste, the unmentionables, the untouchables. And so they don't appear in this book at all, and yet their absence is one of the loudest things in it. And I believe that is deliberate. They are the untouchables. They don't have any say. They fall below the lowest of the low, and that is part of the story of this whole undiscussed, undocumented caste system. It's kind of a thriller. 150 pages in, I thought, where's this going to go? We've got this and we've done it. And actually there is room to develop so many of the stories. So we don't have stock characters. We don't have the refugee. We get some real story and some genuine pathos that is not out of a file marked stock character. There is room for each of these to develop a backstory and a motivation. No one is uncompromised. So the Eritrean woman, Sirkit, who is extorting Dr. Green to run this clinic, is he kind of a hero for doing this? Is she kind of perfect for turning this situation? It was her husband who he had killed, into something good. Well, we find out that her motivations aren't so pure. We find out that the husband, the victim, perhaps was not so pure. And everyone is tainted at some point by this inequality. So having seen the room that the author gives these characters, my next concern was, well, how are we going to end this? Will we be able to stick the landing? Because there's no way this can end well. The tension builds, and people find out, as I say, his wife is he's working at the clinic every night and lying to his wife about where he is. His wife is on the case trying to find out how this Eritrean refugee was knocked down and killed and who was responsible for that. And we're building towards some kind of climax, and I was nervous, not just because of the story, I was nervous how it was going to end. I think she absolutely sticks the landing. and not in a happy resolution, but in an ending where those with privilege retain the benefits of their privilege, while those without it are more likely to suffer and have a harder time of it. Really impressive. I was not expecting this at all, and I think it's kind of fantastic. This is Waking Lions, L'Ha'ir Arayot in Hebrew, by Eilert Gundar Goshen, published in England by Pushkin Press. Next up, after that ride, I read All-Star Batman and Robin, Volume 1. I think there only ever will be Volume 1. This is a collection of 9 comic books, and I think the series folded with issue 10, which was controversial and was released and then withdrawn. So this is the first 9. This was a kind of retelling of the Batman story, and it begins on the night that Dick Grayson, who becomes Robin, his parents are murdered at the circus. The Flying Graysons are shot and killed, and he sees his parents being killed, and Batman happens to be, Bruce Wayne is in the audience at the time with his date Vicky Vale, and he kidnaps Dick Grayson and brings him home, and that's the basis of the story. So it's a retelling of stories that we know about Batman. This is written by Frank Miller and Jim Lee. Frank Miller, one of the most famous comic book writers. He wrote The Dark Knight Returns, which is an absolute key text for anyone who reads comic books today. He also wrote Sin City, which we know is made into a movie, and he co-directed, I think, parts of the movie with Robert Rodriguez, Sin City and Sin City 2. He directed the movie The Spirit, which didn't do very well. He wrote the graphic novel 300, which was made into the movie with Gerard Butler. And so he has a lot of form, very well respected, terrific writer, and drawn by Jim Lee, who was one of the great artists. Started with Marvel, I think, and did some work on X-Men, and one of the founders of Image, and now he's back at DC as, I think, a senior editor, and this is his artwork. This book was absolute bollocks. Tripe of the highest order. Frank Miller's become a bit of a fascist, it seems. So we have the Batman saying things like, "I'm the goddamn Batman," and "shut up" a lot. He says "shut up" a lot. He kidnaps the boy who's just witnessed his parents being killed. He's absolutely callous. I won't go as far to say that he kills anyone, but he is not gentle with the police that try and stop him. This was absolutely astonishing shite. Not recommended at all. And then the book I'm currently reading is By a Spider's Thread by Laura Lippman. Remember her? Foreshadowing? She was on the... So this is the 8th in the Tess Monaghan series. So I've read all 7. This is number 8. I pretty much decided after 7 that I wasn't going to read any more of these, but I'd already bought this, and I read 7 a while ago, and lockdown, I don't have a new book, so I just picked this off the TBR pile and decided I had it, I might as well read it, but I'm pretty firmly decided that I'm not going to read another. Tess Monaghan is a Baltimore-based PI. We love things in Baltimore. Laura Lippman is from Baltimore. She was a journalist, I think originally in Baltimore. Ann Tyler writes about Baltimore. John Waters makes movies about Baltimore. Barry Levinson makes movies about Baltimore. Laura Lippman's husband, David Simon, wrote The Wire. He was also a journalist at the Baltimore Sun and wrote The Wire about Baltimore. So we love books about Baltimore, and when I was looking for to read more female crime fiction authors, I started the Tess Monaghan series, and the first one was good, which is why I purchased more. It was good enough, and I didn't mind it. And then the second one wasn't great, and then the third one was okay again, and they've been very uneven. I don't think it's the cleanest writing. They're just not really good enough for me to continue. So I'll read this when I'm 100 pages in, This one, Tess Monaghan is Irish Catholic father, and on her mother's side she's a Weinstein, and that's often at play in the series. And this one in particular because she's been tasked by an Orthodox Jewish man to find his wife who has disappeared with their children. So yeah, I'll stick it out and get through this. This will going to take me a day or two, and then I think I'm probably done with Tess Monaghan and Laura Lippman. I know she's done some standalones, but I'm not overly fond of the writing. And that's my week. That's, God, 20 minutes. Thanks for sticking around. God bless you. Take care.